Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the OurWhisky Festival. Happy Thursday night to everyone watching, wherever you are in the world. I'd love to see where everyone's from. So as usual, please let me know where you're watching from, because I'd love to see all these names come in. Matt Baker. Hello. Hi, Matt. Nice to see you. Let us know where you're from and what you're doing. If you've got a tasting pack in front of you, or if maybe you haven't got a tasting pack, that's okay. Grab a bottle of whiskey and do join along with us, because we've got a really cracking session about to kick off. So this is going to be all about rye whiskey. So, did anyone join us last week for Club Tropicana? That was such an amazing session. I really enjoyed that. So it was all about big, fruity, tropical styles of whiskey. We kicked off with an amazing lilt-inspired highball from Irvin Tchaikovsky from the Singleton, which is phenomenal, and then ended with this hilarious kind of generation game conveyor belt of Tesco shopping from Billy Layton from Redbreast, which was brilliant. So if you missed it, don't worry, you can go back and watch all of the sessions from the OurWhisky Festival on our Facebook and YouTube channels. So please go and do that at another time. For now, you want to stay here and join us for the Rising Tide. So this is going to be an exploration of rye whiskies from all around the world. Obviously, if you've bought a tasting pack, then you will know that the OurWhisky Festival is a charitable event. So all of the profits raised from this event is going to the Drinks Trust, which is a charity that helps people in the drinks industry who've maybe fallen on hard times. And after the year that we've had, we're really trying to give something back to that community. Obviously now bars are starting to reopen, but it's something that we really want to try and help everybody get back on their feet, get everyone out of furlough and get those bars reopened and being successful. So if you've bought a tasting pack, thank you, because you've helped make this happen. You've really contributed to this. So a huge thank you. I also need to say a big thank you to our partners who are the Dram team and Claxton's, who have been helping out with logistics, and Milroy's of Soho, who are our retail partners. So all of the whiskies, or most of the whiskies you'll see in the event today, are available at Milroy's. If you have tasting packs in front of you, you'll see they're numbered 1 to 5, and then there's a mystery dram which is labelled X. Unfortunately, I didn't manage to get around to tasting all of the whiskies before I bottled them all, and since having a try of them, we're going to be tasting them in a bit of a funny order, so you're going to have to listen up. I will keep reiterating which number we're on as we're going through, so we're not going to be tasting them in order of 1 to 5. Just pay attention for when we start to talk about them, so hopefully you'll be able to stay on track. A little bit of housekeeping before I do reveal our guests, and we've got some brilliant people to talk you through your whiskies today. If you have any questions or any comments, I'd love to see them. I see there's loads coming in already from people. So Erin Davies from Birmingham, hi Erin. Rachel from West London, hello. Once Upon a Whiskey, looking forward to trying some good rye, absolutely. Sean from Edinburgh, hi Sean, glad you got the link. Tabby, hi from a damp Brighton, I'm with you here. Tabby right in the trenches. Andy from Totnes. Amy from Leeds. Wow, everyone is in here. Martin Murray, thank you so much everyone for joining us. If you have any questions or comments, do leave them in the chat, and we will try and ask all of them, as many as we can, to our panel. So this is a really fascinating discussion. I'm sure you have loads of questions, because I certainly do already. If you're a bit nervous though about asking a question, that's fine. There is, of course, no such thing as a stupid question. All questions are valid. But if you're nervous of saying it publicly, then you can DM me on Instagram at OurWhisky, and I'll be checking those throughout the show, and I'll be able to pick them up, and I can ask those anonymously if that's how you prefer to do it. That's fine. Tasting will be recorded, so you can watch this back whenever you like. So if you have to leave halfway through, maybe the pub's calling or you've got to go out and meet your mate, that's okay. So head off, and you can always come back and watch this another time. That's no problem. Also, don't forget, please share your experience on social media. We love seeing all your tasting packs going everywhere. It's nice for me to see them in people's hands. So please share all of this on social media. It's at OurWhisky on Instagram. And if you're watching on Facebook and YouTube, well, you're here already. So thank you very much. just lastly as well, if you do taste anything today that you particularly like, then the lovely team at Milroy's are offering a discount. So if you head on over to milroys.co.uk, then they are offering a 10% discount on all of the bottles featured throughout the festival. You just need to use the discount code OurWhisky10. That will get you 10% off, which is a nice little bonus. Right. I think with that, we better introduce some guests so we can get tasting some whiskey. What do you all think? All happy with that? Good stuff. Right. First up, I wonder if anyone's guessed who we've got in today. I always love this part. Has anyone guessed what whiskies we've got on? Because we haven't announced, we haven't said which whiskies are in. No, actually, maybe there was a cheeky reveal on someone's Instagram account earlier today. So someone gave it away if anyone was watching. But I'm going to reveal my first guest, who is Alex Walpert, co-founder of East London Liquor Company. How are you, Alex?
Very well. Great to be on. Hi, Becky. Hi, everyone.
Nice to have you, Alex. Really good to have you here. I love the nice growth you've got coming on in your chin. It's coming along well.
I trimmed it in honour of today, so it was looking a lot more scraggly earlier.
Lockdown hair. If anyone's noticed from last week, I've had the chop too. That's pretty cool. I feel my head's so much lighter. Our next guest, though, is Hans Martin Hansgaard from Stauning. Hi, Hans. How are you?
Hi, Becky. I'm glad to be here.
Good to have you, Hans. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm looking forward to trying some of your whiskey.
Yeah.
Great. Good to have you. Our next guest is Christian Perez, production manager for RBK. Hi, Christian.
Yeah. Hi, Becky. How are you?
Great. Really lovely to have you. Good to have you here. Thanks so much for joining. Our fourth guest now is none other than Chico Rosa from Oxford Artisan Distillery. Hi, Chico.
Hey, Becky. Hey, everyone. What are you doing?
Oh, so good to have you here, Chico. I love the rows of spirits on the shelves behind you. Look at that.
Oh, no. Yeah, we should send us some later.
Yes, please. Well, actually, you've given me a few bottles. I still need to crack those open. And finally, last but not least, please welcome Bastian Huser from Spreewood Distillers. Hi, Bastian. Bastian, can you unmute yourself, please? There you go.
There we go. Hello, everyone. Good to be here.
It's like a proper Zoom call, isn't it? Oh, well, thank you, everybody, for joining us. Oh, my goodness, look, we have Corey Mason watching along as well. Hi, Corey. Corey was previous distiller at Oxford. Lovely to see you joining us, Corey. Wow, what a lineup. If anybody is not aware of these guys that we've got on the call today, or the distilleries, you're in for a real treat, because the rye whiskies they've been creating are phenomenal. I, for one, can't wait to get started on all of those. You'll notice, though, that there are 6 whiskies in your pack, and we only have 5 guests. So one of our guests couldn't actually be with us today, which is fine. But I'm going to be covering her spot first. That's okay. Let's start off with, how many people, can I just ask everyone watching, how many of you are familiar with rye whiskey? Have you tasted very much from around the world? Are you just familiar really with rye whiskey that comes from America or Canada? Or is this your first time tasting rye whiskey? I'd love to see how familiar people are with this grain and with this style of spirit. Wrong one. Tabby Adams has been wanting to try the RBK and Oxford Rye, so this is going to be good. Tabby, you are absolutely spot on there, and they are both phenomenal whiskies. Once Upon a Whiskey has no idea about rye. Well, do you know what? You are in the right place. The right place? There'll be loads of puns, don't worry. I'll try and keep them minimal. Ashley Hunker, all the rye. Yes, Ashley, 100%, totally with you. Tom Pinson has only tried American and maybe one Canadian. Well, look, if you are unfamiliar with rye, I think what we could do is maybe give you a bit of a run through of what exactly rye whiskey is. So I'll just bring up an image of some rye grain here. So this is rye. So this is a grain which grows in several countries around the world. And as you probably know, whiskey can be made from any kind of grain. So barley, wheat, corn or rye, or many other types of grain as well, but those are the 4 main varieties. And if you've ever tasted rye bread, you'll know it's got a nutty, spicy, even bready kind of character, and often that can manifest itself as rich fruits or spices like chili and black pepper, or sometimes even menthol in whiskey. Now, something I know that all of our guests today are going to be talking about is how difficult rye whiskey is to, rye grain is to work with. It's a very, very sticky type of grain. And it's quite difficult to mash. So a lot of distillers will usually cut their rye with other grains in their mash. So they'll use a percentage of malted barley or even some wheat or corn in there as well. So we're going to be looking at a variety of different types of rye whiskey, and from distillery to distillery, it will vary how it's processed, even down to the stills, how long it's fermented for, the types of yeast, everything about it is different and unique to each distillery. As you know, a lot of you have just commented, if you have tasted a rye whiskey before, the likelihood is it's probably come from America or from Canada. Those styles of rye whiskey are the most dominant, the most popular, but now there are so many distilleries opening around the world that are creating rye whiskey, which is super exciting because there's so much flavor for us to explore. We are going to be looking at different types of rye from the UK and Europe today. So that's everything we're going to explore. But the first one we're going to kick off with. So in your sample with the black top that's marked X, you'll see this is an American rye whiskey. So we were going to, unfortunately, Elizabeth McCall, who's the assistant master distiller at Woodford Reserve, couldn't join us today. So I'm just going to talk us through this whiskey to kick us off. So I have a nice picture of Woodford rye. Here we go. So our first whiskey, Woodford Reserve Rye. So this one is bottled at 45.2% ABV. Now this is a Kentucky straight rye whiskey. So to be a Kentucky straight rye whiskey, that means the mash bill has to include a minimum of 51% rye. It has to be matured in new charred American oak barrels for at least 2 years, and it has to be made in Kentucky as well. So this one actually has a rye content, quite a low rye content actually, of 53%. So what we'll find in this whiskey, if you're nosing and tasting out in front of you now, and not all of our panelists unfortunately have got a tasting pack in front of them, but those of you that have, what are the kind of aromas and flavors that you're getting off of this one? And those of you at home as well, let us know what you're tasting. Alex, I know you've got this. What are you smelling? What are you tasting in this?
There's a lot of green pepper, sort of capsicum on the nose. And a real spicy note on the palate. Yeah, vanilla notes as well coming through. Yeah,
lots of vanilla from that
as well. So
that new American oak cask is really imparting a lot of a kind of vanilla notes. There's a little bit of fudge coming through, but then I like that green capsicum note. It's quite fresh, and it's almost green in a way, which I find in quite a lot of rye whiskey. But on the palate, I've tasted this before, but for me, it's not quite as spicy and bold and full in your face as some other ryes with a higher rye content because of that higher proportion of corn, which actually makes this a little bit, say, sweeter, more buttery, slightly oily as well. What is everyone at home tasting? Tabby Adams gets a nose of banana, pepper, vanilla, and dill pickle. There you go, dill pickle. That's interesting, with a bit of grass. The grassiness is a characteristic that's very dominant. Well, it's very popular to rye whiskey. Once Upon a Whiskey gets bubblegum. Yes, actually, I agree with the bubblegum on the palate. That's really nice. Matthew Cusworth gets a lovely menthol top note. Yeah, lots of lovely menthol in this one. So I think it's a nice one to start us off with because obviously when we drink rye whiskey, this is what normally comes to mind is a rye from Kentucky. But as we'll see, we'll start moving through all the different countries and all the different lineup that we have here today so we can explore rye a little bit more in a little bit more depth. our next whiskey, which we'll come to in a minute, is from, let me just double check because these are in the wrong order. It's from London. So the next one is from Alex. Alex, how long have you been working with rye whiskey, and what were the main challenges that you found when you first started working with it?
Oh, we've been working with rye since the beginning. We started laying down our first whiskey cask about 6 months after we opened the distillery 7 years ago. And yeah, I mean, the kind of we were all inspired by rye to try and explore that spicy, rich, fruity flavor profile, and just see how we could try and make that our own, really. And I mean, as I'm sure everyone else on this call will say, you know, it's making rye whiskey is a sticky, difficult proposition. And actually, you know, we've experimented with quite a nice range of rye percentages. But what you're about to try is a 42% malted rye to a 58% malted barley mix, and we really found that was that captured enough of the rye characteristic and gave enough kind of depth and flavour to it that we wanted to showcase.
Sure.
And not needing to have 51% to be able to call it a rye whiskey. In England meant we were kind of quite happy to sit at that mash bill.
Okay, I think it's probably a good idea for us to start tasting this second whiskey. So the London Rye is the bottle marked number 2. So I mentioned at the very start that we're going to be tasting some of these out of order. So you want your bottle that's marked number 2. And this one is the ELLC. This is the East London Liquor Company, London Rye. So is this, Alex, talk us through this one. This isn't the first rye that you've released, is it?
No, it's not. It's the second rye that we've released. Third rye we released. Sorry, third rye. I mean, I think this is. I think our whiskey just, you know, we're new whiskey distillers, so every time we release whiskey, hopefully it gets better. And this is certainly my favourite of our rye releases. You know, this is a combination of double pot and column distillation, and we've aged it in 4 different casks actually. I mean, most of the casks in the lineup will be known to people. Virgin French oak. And an STR, so a shaved toasted recharred cherry, and a bourbon cask. But the kind of the cowboy or the rookie in that lineup is a chestnut cask, and that's really kind of gives that kind of coffee, that malted kind of chocolatey, that almost that green coffee note really gets accentuated with a chestnut cask. And so you may be getting some of those notes on the nose, but once you've tried it, I'd love to see some feedback about what you all think.
Yeah, do everyone leave a comment. Let us know what you think of the London Rye whiskey. Erin Davies says, "God damn, that nose is cool." Is that? I take it that's in response to the East London Rye, which is amazing. Alistair McCarroll has asked, "Is this liquid sourced or is this produced at the distillery in London?" Well,
we're produced in our distillery in London. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, here's a lovely tasting note. Cocoa Pops and milk on the nose. I do love a cereal reference, especially Cocoa Pops. That sounds really nice. Tabitha Adams, freshly cut grass, menthol, nuts and vanilla on the nose. I completely agree. So Alex, do you just produce rye whiskey at the distillery, or do you produce other styles of whiskey as well?
So we kind of oscillate between single malt and rye as being the 2 main products that we make, but we also have a kind of experimental part. What we do, we released a wheat whiskey last year. We've done a couple of collabs with a Californian distillery where we try to champion the process of blending and experiment with some American whiskies. But yeah, I mean, the 2 main core products that drive our whiskey program is single malt and our London Rye.
Yeah, you've done a London wheat as well, haven't you?
We did, yeah. It was a kind of inspired by what Adam at Sonoma County Distilling has been making a wheat whiskey there for some time, and it's that lovely kind of brioche persimmony notes all come through. So yeah, that was a kind of lovely one-off, which we're all kind of thinking, should we do it again, because it worked so well. But yeah, it's the kind of the mainstay of those 2 main SKUs.
So what is it, do you think, about your rye whiskey that makes it so characteristically London in its kind of character and its personality?
Well, I mean, I guess, we don't have fields bordering our distillery for obvious reasons. I guess it's kind of, we source our grain from Norfolk as close as we can. But I guess what I really love about the rye, and what kind of always puts a smile on my face, is the fact you get that spice, and you get the kind of green coffee, the chocolate, the kind of malted, digestive kind of biscuit note, but that you also get that kind of almost like stewed, candied fruit note, that kind of stewed stone fruit note at the end, which just gives it that richness, and I love it. That's the balance of the spice and the rich fruit, which for me really works.
Has got a lot of rich fruit. I love that. It's got really mouth-watering. That finish just carries on and on. It's the like dried apricots, lots of dried tropical fruits as well. Alexander Walker, hey Alex, says dark chocolate covered coffee beans. That's interesting. Because Erin also says it reminds her of cascara, the fruit of coffee, which is great tasting note. Saucia as well, so much chocolate and creaminess. So those of you who do have a tasting pack on our panel, sorry again, if anyone was with us last week, you'll know I've had trouble getting packs sent out of the country because of Brexit, but I tried to get them in the hands of everybody. But those of you who are based in the UK, what do you think of the London Rye whiskey? And is this your first time trying it? Chico, I know you've tried this before, and I know you're a fan.
No, I'm definitely a fan of this whiskey. It's so hot chocolate and strawberries, and I love chestnut as well. I think like one of the first whiskeys I've ever distilled in my life went into a chestnut cask, just like part of like homemade research, and I love how this is related and is blended with the spicy note of the rye. I totally agree with Alex that it captures very well the rye character in it, and at the same time it just blends with all the cask maturation and the malted barley. It's delicious. I love it. Well done.
Christian, what are your thoughts on this? Because obviously with our Beaky, you're restricted in the types of cask that you can use. So what are your thoughts on Alex using a variety of different casks in this?
Yes, I'm a little bit jealous, to be honest. But at the same time, with the different casks that Alex has used, I'm impressed that the rye character has still come through, not only in the nose, but also on the palate. It's got that nice balance of the spicy with the sweetness of the oak. And it makes for a nice and elastic finish. So yeah, well done. Yeah, definitely.
It's really interesting to see how rye whiskey developed in different types of oak as well. So, or not even oak, in different types of wood even. So as we go and taste through this, there'll be there's actually quite a lot of different wood that's being used to mature rye whiskey, as we'll see from some of our other examples. So you guys at home seem to love this one. Amy, love this. Delicious. Absolute banger. You're not wrong. I think it's awesome. It's a really great whiskey. Joe McGurr, delicious, Alex. Lots of spice and chocolate, and a touch of water opens up as well. So I totally agree, Joe. If you're at home and you're new to whiskey, don't be afraid to add some water to your whiskeys. Some of them are going to be increasing in ABV as we go through them, if you'd have noticed that on the bottles. It's fine to add water. What I would recommend is nosing and tasting first, and then adding water if you need to. Obviously, you can't take the water out once you've added it, so you only add it once you've had a nose and a taste first. Right, I think time to move on to our next whiskey, if everyone is ready for that. So I'm just going to refer to my sheet to see what the order is. Right, so we're now going to go back to whiskey number one. So whiskey number one is Stauning. So Hans, can you please talk us through your whiskey?
Yeah, sure. I would like to go back a little bit and talk a little bit about how why we started making rye whiskey. I feel when we started Stauning whiskey in 2005, there were no other distilleries in Denmark. So we kind of were the pioneers of whiskey making in Denmark. And we knew we were going to make single malts, and our geography is we are located on the west coast of Denmark, kind of like the Islay type of whiskies, or the Springbanks, all the way to the west coast in Scotland. So we knew we were going to do single malts, but also, so the first few batches we made were smoked single malt, where we used the local barley and of course local peat from Denmark. And but we soon realized that we have this close connection to rye in Denmark, especially through rye bread, which is the most common lunch in Denmark. So we thought, okay, and we also had, of course, a love for American rye whiskies. So it was very close to our hearts to make a rye whiskey. And also there was a shortage at that time. Not many distilleries were making rye whiskey, and we thought, okay, we need to do something to bring this very lovely type of whiskey back on the world market. So we started making rye and from Danish rye and Danish barley, and this the one we're having now. This one is it's about 4 years old, matured in virgin American oak, and the mash bill is 70% rye and 30% barley. And because we have our own floor maltings, Becky, I saw you had the photo of the distillery before.
I do. There you are.
Yeah, here's the floor maltings. We kind of invented our own system of floor malting. This is we call this the malt turner, and every grain that goes into our whiskey is floor malted at our distillery. The earlier bottles, I have one here. Actually, the first one we made, if we can see it here, it's called Astounding Rye, First Impression, and it's the first product we launched, distilled in 2009 and 10, and launched in 2011. So this is the earliest the rye whiskey from Denmark. Yeah, so we malt everything, and in the earlier versions we didn't malt the rye whiskey or the rye that goes into the whiskey. We didn't know that it was possible, but we soon discovered that as we became more and more skilled in malting the barley, we tried to malt some batches of rye as well, and thought it was a good thing for our rye whiskey. So now everything is malted as well in the rye whiskey.
And yeah, absolutely, Hans. As well, I wanted to also touch on your stills are rather unique as well, in the sense that a lot of stills will be fired using steam, but you're actually using direct fire. And I do have a nice picture of your still distillery setup. Can you talk us through the impact of using a direct fire to heat your stills, and what impact that has on the whiskey?
Yeah, definitely. Again, it all goes back to when we started in 2005 and got some very primitive equipment. Astounding wasn't meant to be a big business like it is today, and a big distillery with a reasonable output. But so we started with cheap equipment, but all these methods we developed in 2005 to 2009, in the early years. We kind of had to stick to them as we grew. So one of the things was that we used these paella burners under the pot stills, and we still had when we built the new distillery. We finished it in 2018. We stuck to this method of direct fire under the stills, and of course it has an obvious effect on the distilling. Part of it is because we have you have all these hot spots under the stills, so you get more caramelization. It's like boiling a piece of meat and frying a piece of meat on a pan. It's the same with the whiskey inside the still. These hot spots they give this Maillard effect that creates a lot of flavor to the whiskey. So it's really nice to have this method of heating the stills, to have it go from the old distillery, the old production, the early methods, to the new and larger.
There are some people who've obviously gotten their noses straight into the glass, which I love. As Hans, as you've been speaking, there's some really great comments already. So, gosh, I don't even know where to start with. There's like everybody's really loving this. Okay, we've got to go back to Tabby. I love your comments. That kicks ass. Absolutely, completely agree. Sam Simmons, it has all that herbal magic. totally does. You can smell like the caramelization on the nose as well. That really lovely kind of, it's not just caramel, it's kind of like, it's toasted. It's this beautiful, beautiful nose. Alex Walker, that nose is unreal. Absolutely. We've got banana and grass on the nose. We've got, nice distiller, nice distilleries. Nice distillery. I'm sure it's a nice distiller as well. Michael Smith says leather, hints of TCP and muddy fields after a spring downpour. Ooh, I definitely get the leather.
I like those comments. Yeah, I get. I've of course tasted it hundreds of times, and I get these warm spices, and also I feel that all of our whiskeys, the single malts and the rye, they have this oiliness and a very clear fruitiness, and also the raw materials, the grains, come through in it. I had this analogy to rye bread, and it's like when you make your own rye bread, it gives off the same smell as our rye whiskey. This rye bread we so popular and so common in Denmark, and also it's also the same ingredients. It's water, yeast, barley, and rye. It's the same in rye bread. So makes sense. Yeah,
absolutely. And obviously, rye bread is such a traditional staple of Denmark as well. And last time I was over in Copenhagen, fell in love with the rye bread at Lille Bakery, which is it's phenomenal. I dream about it all the time. It's wonderful. A very good question has come in from Erin Davies. What challenges does having direct fire pose for you as a distiller?
Yeah, we have had a lot of problems with it. First of all, we talked about this earlier. The rye is difficult to handle in almost any process in the distillery. From malting, it sticks together, and from mashing it, where it's even worse when it's wet and it clogs up. We had problems draining it, getting the water out of the rye after mashing. So it's really troublesome. It's much easier to make single malt. But the problem we have experienced quite a lot is burning, where when you have some porridge on the stove and you leave it too long, especially when you have a direct fire. If you have a gas stove, for example, it really burns easily. And our wort is we have an unclear wort, very much unlike other distilleries, because we don't filter it really very well. It also leads back to how we started. We didn't have the expertise and the equipment to filter it. So our base recipe is made with unclear wort, and we kept it it was important for us to, even though it's difficult to work with, we feel it contributes to the flavor. So we're working with unclear wort with a lot of solids, and that burns, of course. So we have to be very careful with the temperature management in the pot stills, and we have 24 of them, which doesn't make it easier.
Yeah, 24 pot stills to be watching over and making sure nothing burns.
Exactly.
I mean, I burn my porridge every morning, and that's just one pan on a stove. So I can't imagine the difficulty. I've got to say, okay, I'm loving the tasting notes that have now moved into emojis. So we're now getting cherries from Matt Baker and banana from Brian. I think that's what you mean, Brian. Thank you very much for the emojis. Let's see what else we can get out in our emoji speak. Thank you so much for that, Hans. That's a wonderful whiskey. And actually, if you haven't done this already, and if you have it in a separate glass, just go back to the London Rye, because it's so much fruity. You get more of that stone fruit coming through after that nice kind of caramelized chocolatiness from the Starling Rye coming back into London. It really accentuates that stone fruit. Really beautiful. Thank you so much for that. That's wonderful whiskey. Don't forget, guys. Yeah, no worries. Don't forget, if you have any questions for our distillers and distillery founders on today, then do leave us a question, and I'll try and ask as many as I can. And don't forget as well, if you like any of these whiskies, then you can head over to milroys.co.uk, and if you use the discount code OurWhisky10, then you'll be able to get 10% off all your bottles, which is Very lovely. I certainly will be considering maybe heading over myself after this tasting. There's some great rye whiskies we've got with us. Right, we're going to move on to our next whiskey, and we're now going to be moving to Scotland. We're heading up to OurWhisky. So, Christian, please, can you introduce our next whiskey? This is whiskey number 3, by the way. Whiskey number 3 in your
Yes.
samples.
Okay, so this is whiskey number 3, and before we taste this whiskey, I was going to suggest that maybe everybody, if they have a glass of water nearby, just to take a little bit of a drink of water rather than diluting the alcohol. So what that allows is that it leaves a film of water in your mouth. So when you try the whiskey, you get the explosion of flavors in the mouth rather than diluting it down in the glass. It's just a personal kind of like technique that someone showed me in cognac, and yeah, it was quite unique. So yeah, as many of you guys know, rye is very challenging to mash and to distill, and all of these horrible stories about stickiness, but it's also very hard to grow. It's a tall grass, and if it rains, then we have to wait until the winds pick up so that it dries the plant, and then the harvester can come and pick it up. Yeah, so I'm not sure if any of you, the crowd knows, but yeah, we're a 2,000-acre farm distillery. So we grow on site all of our raw materials, starting from potatoes, wheat, rye, peas, and barley. Well, the only thing that we don't have is maltings yet, but hopefully they'll come along. We're also very big proponents of terroir, and the reason is simply, you know, it's the aroma of the grain is actually transferring to the spirits. This particular release is the 1794 rye, and we use Arantes, the variety Arantes, but we also use Magnifico and Bono, and they all have different characters just by smelling the grain. For instance, Arantes, it had a very mocha kind of character. Magnifico, which is another variety, it had a very grassy character. And Bono also had a really close to espresso being kind of character. The rye is not malted, so we have to dry the grain when we harvest it to about 14% moisture content. And then it goes into the mashing procedure, and then we ferment on the skin and we distill on the skin. So therefore, our spirit actually comes out like very heavy oily characters, you know. So we go through 2 pot distillations, and then sometimes we use a column with 20 plates. But I think on this release we didn't really use any of the spirit that we use through the column. That's for another releases that we did. So this is actually our 4th release. We released a rye, which was a rye spirit, a 2-year-old. Then we released a 3-year-old rye whiskey, which was finished on Pedro Jimenez cask. And then we did a 4-year-old, which was finished in Armagnac, and then the 1794, which is the one that you have on your glass right now. And then this is fermented and aged for 3 years in American heavy char oak, or medium char, sorry. So it'll be char 3. But we also use toasted barrels, so that way we can extract not only some color, but also some vanilla notes in it. It's at 48% alcohol. So as I said, I tend not to drown my whiskey. So I drink a little water, and then I taste them, and I get a better idea of what the flavor profile is on the whiskey.
There's some fantastic tasting notes coming through from people who've started nosing and tasting already. But Christian, what are the main characteristics in the OurWhisky Highland Rye?
Yes, I get a lot of nutmeg, and it's also grassy, green apples. And I think that characteristic of green apple comes from our very long fermentation program that we have, which is nearly 110 to 115 hours. And like I said, we distill on this, we ferment on the skin. I think it will be super difficult to separate a mash with rye. We also use 60% on our bill, on our mash bill, and 40% barley and 20% wheat. And the wheat just brings a little bit of sweetness into the game, you know. So it's a nice mash bill.
It's really creamy, this one. What is it that makes this one? It's very it's quite silky in terms of texture. Why is that? What makes it so silky?
I think it's the barreling program, because what we do is that we do racking on the barrels. Here in Scotland, we're not in Kentucky, so we're using a heavy char barrel. So what that does is that it's actually going to do an extraction on a little bit too slow. So the actual wood tannins are going to be extracted too powerful here in Scotland because it's cold. In Kentucky, it's a fast extraction, and over here it's a bit too slow. And we noticed that at 2 years, it was getting a bit too oaky. So we decided to start racking some of the liquid into more neutral barrels, and that way we can grab these barrels that have been racked and emptied and put into a single malt. So that way we're doing it like a circular economy and really engulfing the spirit of our beginning or single malts. So I think it's because of that, you know, and then also the toast that is on the American barrels. The toasting level, the vanilla notes are very pronounced.
So really beautiful whiskey. I love all of these tasting notes that are coming in. So the guys on our panel who've got this whiskey, what are your thoughts? Alex, having gone first with your London rye and then heading over to Starning as well, and now up to Scotland, what are your observations on how they're so different? And rye whiskey is just, I mean, we've been in 3 different countries now. It's so different.
It's amazingly different. I love the salinity. I mean, is your fermentation open top?
The fermentations are not open top, no. Okay. We leave the hatchback open, but they're not really open top, no.
Where does that salinity come from?
Yeah, I think it's some mermaids that go into the cellar and like they do their stand there. Really, we're about, I want to say maybe 4 kilometers from the sea, but I don't know if, you know, it's close enough, like Isla, you know, that you have the sea actually hitting the warehouses. So I don't know where the salinity may come from. You know, I don't want to speculate, but it does have a salty character there, like some minerality. It may come from the fermentation or maybe the distillation techniques. But yeah, it does have some salinity.
I love it. For me, it's like toasted rye bread, obviously, with with salted butter and a blob of blackcurrant jam on the top as well. Like I always get with Arbeiki this rich kind of dark red berry fruit character from the distillery. I think it's lovely, and all of the releases that you've put out are just phenomenal. They're so big, so full of flavour. I love this, Tabby. Would pair well with Japanese sashimi. Yeah, I completely agree. And this is nice as well. Hold on, this one here. Where are we? Lots of maritime flavours. Can imagine fruit being unloaded from a ship. That's a nice image. I like that. So I think, you know, it's what we've done so far is we've tasted 4 whiskies. From America, we've then gone down to London, then we've been over to Denmark and back up to Scotland, and each one of them has its own different characteristic, its own style, its own personality, I suppose. And that's not necessarily just because of the country it's produced in, but like all of you have brought your own unique twist, your own take on rye whiskey to the table. But all of you are making rye whiskey in countries that haven't traditionally been making rye whiskey before. Well, why do you think now all of a sudden we're seeing, and this opens up for everyone, Sebastian and Chico also, if you have any thoughts on this too, why do you think now all of a sudden we're seeing this interest in rye whiskey? Anyone?
Well, I think it's a younger generation. It's also more innovative, and there's an open avenue to start making in other countries other than in the United States. So I think everybody noticed that rye whiskey was being made in the United States heavily, and it's been doing well too. So
yeah,
also you can release it sooner.
And I kind of who brought so we had all the I mute. Did you unmute?
Bastian, I'm gonna mute you just for a second. There's a lot of feedback. I don't know if anyone else is getting that. Robo Bastian, it's you getting that robotic thing again. Do you want to try exiting and then coming back in just to see if that fixes it?
Of course.
That was a bit scary. A little bit Star Wars.
We had a run through earlier today, and we had the same issue. And we've generally found logging off and logging back in again seems to fix it, which is the obvious fix. So let's see if this works. Do you want to try speaking?
Can you hear me? See me?
Yes, you're perfect.
Sorry about that.
Sorry,
I'm in the middle of nowhere, so my internet connection is just not really very good. So I make it quickly. I was just mentioning that basically a lot of Europeans brought rye into the US through the settlers from all different countries, and started to grow it there and make whiskey out of it. And now it kind of comes back to maybe where it at least in New Make Spirit came from. So I think that's something we always like to talk about.
And we're going to come to your whiskey at the very end, but what I've definitely noticed with Stalk Club and your positioning of that particular whiskey is it's very modern. It's very, and same with you, Alex, actually, with London Rye. It's very modern, and you're really appealing, I suppose, to a new kind of whiskey drinker, this new generation of whiskey drinker. What is it that people are looking for? And if you're tasting at home as well, if you're new to whiskey, what is it that you're looking for, Hans?
Yeah, I was going to comment on the rise of rye whiskey, why it's gaining in popularity. I think there's also because it was the original ingredient in many of the classic cocktails, like Old Fashioned and Manhattans and Boulevardier. And so if you want to make these cocktails with the right raw materials, for many years people were using bourbons, which is perfectly fine, of course. But if you want the true flavor of when they were invented, you need to go back and kind of use rye whiskies. So of course these are not meant especially for cocktails and for mixing, but they do make sense in mixing if you want to make these high-end cocktail products. Yeah.
Definitely. I wonder as well, because rye has such a Chico. You're muted.
Sorry. I also think that when you look to rye as a grain, we can compare it to rye bread with wheat bread or any other kind of bread. And I think when you look to rye bread, we see such a dark, rich flavor. And I think about rye as a grain that it's really hard it's really hard to work with. When distilling it, we can get so much out of the distill. so much complex and rich flavors that probably with wheat, oats, barley, we could get other kinds of flavors, of course. But with rye, it's so complex and so rich that is definitely a category apart. And I think that's what brings a lot of fans to the rye tide. I think it's I think it's one of the is the uniqueness also of the grain itself.
I agree. I think it's got a really lovely, bold characteristic to it, and I think a lot of people who are coming into whiskey now, and really everybody is looking for more flavour. Everything is flavour driven, isn't it? So rye inherently has it's packed full of flavour, and the 4 samples we've tasted so far, I think everyone will agree. There's just so much going on in each one of them. There's so much complexity. There's lots of fruit. There's saltiness. There's bread. There's savoury notes, there's butteriness, there's so much happening in there. Okay, let's move on to our next whiskey. So now we're going to head to, I'm losing my place, we're going to head to number 5. So we're jumping again, sorry about this. We're heading to number 5. So that is Chico's whiskey, Oxford Artisan Distillery. And Chico, I full disclosure here, I helped Chico and the team at Oxford Artisan Distillery launch this just a couple of weeks ago, which was a brilliant day. And I was so pleased to be able to taste this in the flesh on the day. I thought it was wonderful. And I'm so grateful that you are here to talk us through it, because this whiskey's actually sold out, right?
Yeah, no. Thank you very much, Becky. I mean, it was an incredible day. It's more than sold out. It sold out in 10 minutes during the launch. And the pre-sale.
Everyone at home is lucky to be tasting this now, because we managed to nab the last few bottles for everyone at home to be able to taste this. So if you've got a tasting pack, then great. Good, lucky you. Sorry, Chico, take it away.
No. It I mean, it was remarkable. It was a long wait to come to this result. I mean, it was 4 years ago that Corey that is watching us now. Corey and I we distilled this liquid. So I mean, here at the Oxford Artisan Distillery, we work with John Letts, our archaeobotanist, and several local farmers to grow our own populations of ancient heritage grains, and the majority of the grains are rice. So we don't work with a single variety in one field. We play with a lot of different varieties as a population growing together, and we see a massive benefit from that, not only in yield but also in flavor and resilience when it comes to the crop itself. We don't touch the soil. We don't plow. We don't use any chemicals, and we also play with not only growing, for example, rye in one field, but also growing other types of grains. So we grow rye together with wheat or with barley, and our goal is to move to a continuous cropping style of agriculture, where we don't need to really interfere with the field itself. And then, once we get all our grains into the distillery, we just try to express the best that we can from those grains. So we also do, as Christian was saying, we also do. We ferment on the skin and distill on the skin, which is a really nice term that I like from the wine industry. That's me and Christian also comes from. We ferment this whiskey that we have in here was produced from 90% of a maslin, which is a field mix between rye and wheat. This maslin was, overall was like around 70 something percent rye, and the rest was wheat growing together in the sandy soils and then we just add 10% of malted barley to help in the mash, and also in backing up the flavor with some nice chocolate notes. I mean, back then, me and Corey were not really milling the grain. We were kind of flaking it in a 1930s huge mill, very, very loud. We could hear the mill just on the bottom of South Park, which is, I mean, we just on top of the hill, and in the bottom of the city center we could I mean, it's so loud. And after mashing it and I mean, because it was flaked, we used to see a lot of caramelization and Maillard reactions in the still, as well as Hans was mentioning before, with his direct heat stills. Here in the picture you can see Nautilus, and the Nautilus is heated through steam coils inside, where all the grains they bake around and give this very nice toasty sourdough, almost like burnt toast character to the whiskey, which is quite subtle. This whiskey is fermented in oak vats, and that's helps controlling the fermentation profile in terms of pH as well, but also the bacteria that goes into this fermentation. There's a lot of lactic acid bacteria coming from the field, and that culture kind of stay alive during, I mean, every batch, which is good and help us having some consistency in terms of creaminess. And then, I mean, this still was double distilled, and then was matured only in New American oak casks. As our first release, we want to showcase a spirit that could be comparable with the majority of the rye in the market. So we didn't go crazy with dessert wine casks or exotic woods. Of course, we want to go there because we love that creative part. But we want to this whiskey to be comparable with the majority of the rye, and also kind of point out the differences from our distillery, not only the toasty, smoky sourdough character, but also a lot of the oily notes and the bread character from it. It's a blend from two casks, both New American oak, but the first one was super fruity and floral and herbal, very kind of classic rye, I'll say. And the second one was super nutty, oily, chocolatey, and smoky. And I mean, we're talking about number 15 and number 17. So it's really, I mean, really probably the same batch. Not the same batch, but really close to each other. And I think the beauty is that we're producing different styles of rye whiskey. We are mainly focused on rye, as I said, but we were playing with different mash bills. This one is only unmalted rye with unmalted wheat and malted barley, but also we are playing with 100% rye. Also, we're planning to do some 100% malted rye in the future, including other kind of grains like oats as well. So yeah, I mean, it's it is quite exciting to think about the future of the rye whiskey with everyone in here, but also I mean, what we have to play with. It's beautiful. I don't know if
Sorry, Chico. I was going to say, I love how you're really focusing on, you're sourcing all of these heritage grains, and you're really focusing on the sustainability and the grain itself, and in terms of terroir. So you're really trying to showcase the best of the rye character. So rather than looking too much at using different types of oak and maybe manipulating the flavor in different ways, you're really focusing on getting the most amount of flavor from that grain and then showcasing what that can do, which I think is really lovely. There are so many beautiful tasting notes, and a lot of people asking how much this whiskey is. Just to reiterate, this one is now sold out. This is the first batch. This is actually the first ever this is the first whiskey release from Oxford Artisan Distillery. So this is a historic moment for everyone. If you're tasting along with us, this is the first ever whiskey from this distillery. So this is quite a big moment for you. But there is a second batch which is still available to order. Chico, is it pre-order?
Yeah, it's on pre-sale. I can also say that it's almost sold out. So it's coming out in beginning of July. And will be quite similar with this whiskey, but also with some input from sweet wine casks. I'll not reveal more about it. We'll have to wait for it.
Keep something up your sleeve. We're looking forward to seeing what that release is. Hopefully I'll come back up to the distillery to have a bit of a play with some of the whiskey you've got in your casks as well. There are some lovely tasting notes coming in for this one too. I need to share some of these. They're lovely. So Martin Murray says, orange blossom, candied fruit and cocoa. Love the mouthfeel. I think there was a question actually about the texture. I can't remember who it was from. Maybe it was from Sean asking about the stills. Does that help with creating that oily kind of texture? Where does that come from?
Absolutely. So I mean, we process all the grain in. So we ferment and also distill the grain. But I mean, our stills, they were bespoke. They were built by South Devon Railway Manufacturing, the last symbol manufactured in the UK. So when you look to our stills, they are quite funky looking. I mean, we never know. So the first time that we fired the stills, they were leaking everywhere, and I mean, they were producing amazing spirits. If you didn't try our vodka, please try, because it's incredible vodka. And then with the columns, we can get a lot of flavor coming through because of the design of the plates. And the best example is our vodka, which is quite flavorful. But in the whiskey, what gives this texture is not only the grains itself. I mean, working with so many varieties of rye. When, for example, I do a bread with our flour, it's just the most flavorful bread I ever try. With I mean, that's really translated in our process. But our stills, they also they are cooled with a kind of a warm tub condenser, and that takes a lot of oily character as well into our new make, and gives all this texture as well.
Actually, speaking about condensers, so obviously if you're using a worm tub, Hans, what type of condensers are you using at Stowning? There was actually a question that came in anonymously through OurWhisky's direct messages. Don't forget, if you do want to ask a question, then do DM me at OurWhisky. And the question was, they're getting a tiny bit of meatiness from the Stowning rye. So is that something to do with the sulfur content? So what kind of condensers are you using?
Actually, I don't have a name for those. They're quite standard condensers. The equipment we got when we started was very much standard equipment. We found it on the internet and ordered it online, and we replicated again. We replicated most of this equipment, just in a little bit larger scale. Of course, we haven't sized them up much, but we have more pot stills and more condensers. But they're just a coil inside a tube, and we have a water cooling system inside the condensers.
Okay. So, is it a copper coil inside the condenser?
It's a copper coil inside and a copper condenser. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's,
and speaking about it, we were talking about. I would like to show this because you were talking, Chico, about vodka, and this is not a vodka, but it's also it's actually also a rye product, and this is extremely meaty in flavor profile. We crossed out the whiskey because it's our new make, but it's a smoked rye new make, smoked with peat. So it's the same mash bill, but the grains have been after malting have been smoked with peat, and this is just really our DNA in our rye, but with the peaty, the smoky flavor. Really nice and very meaty. Yeah, goes very well with smørbrød and open sandwiches and rye bread and smoked fish and oysters and stuff like that. Very easy to pair with food. Yeah.
Sounds wonderful. Do you know what? So far, actually, I think all the rye whiskies we've tasted would be wonderful with food. They've got this perfect match of sweet and savoury going on, which is really lovely. Love that. Thank you so much, Hans. And do you think we'll ever see that come to fruition as a matured whiskey?
We will, definitely. Yeah, it's maturing as we speak. Yeah.
Great. So, well, keep us up to date. Maybe you'll have to come back next year or the year after, whenever it's ready, and show it to us.
Love to. Yeah.
Cool, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that, Chico. Wonderful whiskey. Lovely to taste it again. Don't forget. Well, all of the whiskies that you've been tasting are available at Milroy's with that 10% discount. Don't forget that is OurWhisky 10. If you use that at the checkout, you'll get 10% off. Obviously, the Oxford Rye isn't available, but from memory, they do have the it's not quite a whiskey. What's the product, Chico, that's available? The rye?
It's Oxford Rye Spirits, which is a rye spirits made with 100% rye, 80% unmalted and 20% malted, and then it's distilled a little bit lighter, so it will require less maturation time. So it's only matured in virgin American oak for 3 months, and it gets so silky, smooth, sweet, and it's beautiful. Like I kind of like. I mean, it's floral, fruity, it's spicy, caramelly.
Yeah.
It's definitely it's sour. Yeah, it's a nice approach.
Nice. Actually, the Oxford Rye we've just tasted, that's 3 years? Is that right? 3-year-old?
Yeah, this is 3 years in a couple of months. Yeah.
Okay. We actually just had a comment earlier on. I can't remember who said it, saying how all of these whiskies taste so much older than their years, because I mean, I'm guessing for the majority of you, actually, everything we've tasted is going to be around 3, maybe 4 years in age, and that's it. And you know, that I think this really just underlines that sentiment that age is just a number, and it doesn't actually mean a lot when you're tasting a whiskey. And I'm sure that's probably something that I hope that people have been tasting the whiskies and not really thought, well, how old is this? Because I think they're just so delicious. Yes, Tabby, it was you that made the comment. Thank you. Thank you very much. You always make the best comments as well. I love it. Thank you for joining us again, Tabby. Oh, I bet Tabby won our golden ticket in the very first session. So I'm wondering, Tabby, now are you kicking yourself that you won it then and not necessarily in this session? Because these have been some fantastic whiskies. I do actually know who the golden ticket winner is. If you'd like to say hi and let us know what you've tasted, and also maybe everyone, if you want to help them out and vote for your favorite at the end, maybe what whiskey they should be taking home. Because if you find a golden ticket hidden in your pack, then that entitles you to get a free full bottle of whiskey. And yes, there is a bottle of the Oxford put to one side, just in case that's the one that's chosen. But we'll see. Right. We've got, we are running out of time, and I think we really need to move on to our last, but definitely not least, final whiskey. So we're going on to whiskey number 4 in Bastian. We're heading over to Germany. Thank you. Can you please talk us through it?
Everyone, I hope you can hear me now, and I'm no robotic. I hope that works out now. We are a small distillery about 60 kilometers south of Berlin, and we've actually, this distillery exists since 2008 on that spot, and We've been able to take it over by chance in 2016. My two partners and me. We just wanted to buy a barrel of whiskey with the previous owner and came back with a distillery, just like you do, on a shopping spree. And we turned it into Germany's first 100% rye whiskey distillery. So all we do and process is locally grown rye. We work together with the Farmers Cooperative here about 2 kilometers away, and that's where we get our rye grains from. We are amidst a biosphere or nature reserve, so lots of good air and lots of birds to see. Also, we have about 200 pairs of storks that come here every year to to build their nests, and that's where the name comes from. Club of Storks. That was what we kind of aimed for. And as I said, we are producing 100% rye whiskies. So far, we only have released whiskies that are 100% unmalted rye. We will be releasing malted rye whiskies from end of this year on also. And we basically, our intention when we took over the distillery, we were thinking, okay, what do we do? And we looked around, and basically a lot of we always stumbled across the rye. It's the predominant grain here. Actually, the region surrounding Berlin is called Brandenburg, and is one of the biggest growing regions for rye. It's got very sandy soil, so you have to have grains that can actually get along without a lot of water and on not so fertile ground, and that's rye actually. So that's basically was one thing. Then further researching, we found out that quite a few American distilleries buy their rye grains here in Brandenburg. One example is Wild Turkey Rye, which is based on Brandenburg rye grain. And also, having been a bartender for quite a long time, one of my partners also, we always loved rye in cocktails when we worked behind bars. So there was like one thing after another, and then basically I think the link to everything is just astounding. Just as Hans mentioned, it's our cultural history with rye, especially in terms of bread. Rye bread, German rye bread is quite well known, and that kind of tied it all together. So we decided, okay, that's what we want to go for, and so we just like Abiki and Oxford Artisan, we also distill full, we call it full grain, but I like on the skin as well. So we mill our rye on site, and then mash and ferment and distill everything on the skin. So there's no filtering in between. It's all full of flavor and everything that you already mentioned. We ferment for roughly 5 days in stainless steel closed fermenters. They are temperature controlled. We wanted to have it under control, and then we distill in what we call a hybrid pot still. So a pot still for the first run, and then basically it goes right over into our column, which has 5 plates. This one has 5 plates, and we have another one with 7 plates. That's basically the second run, and then it comes out at about 75% ABV before we before we put it into the barrel with 60% ABV. And we age in virgin American oak and virgin German Napoleon oak. Those Napoleon oak barrels are at least at the oak trees were at least 250 years old before they are kind of worked into barrels. So very lots of tannin, lots of spices. That's kind of our signature barrel in all of our whiskies. And for the one that you have is it's the Store Club Foolproof whiskey. There we also added some sweet wine barrels and some ex-Oloroso sherry barrels, which have not been only finished, but also aged in between 3 and 4 years for the full maturation period. And then we blend those 4 barrel types together. Our way, and I hope you like it.
This is really wonderful, and I want to hear a lot more about the different the impact of all the different production methods that you're using there. But I'm really intrigued by this Napoleon oak because we don't really see a lot of that. Is that native to Germany, Napoleon oak, and what kind of flavor do you get from that particular style of oak that you wouldn't necessarily get from, say, other European oaks, Hungarian, for instance, or Spanish?
To explain to the listeners who are not too familiar into European oak, basically you have American oak, you have European oak, you have Japanese oak. I think there is a 1 or 2 more types, but the dominant ones are the American and European oak, and German oak is basically the same as French, Hungarian, or Czech, but I'm sure there are some differences, although I don't think they're really I mean, they all those oak trees, they grow. Some used to be French, are now German, and back. You know, there's lots of wars in between. I just know that our Cooper, he basically, when he picks the barrels, the oak trees for our barrels, he has to X-ray them for pieces of grenades or bullets from from 2 world wars and a few more wars, actually, if you go back 250 years. So there's lots of work involved. The flavor they usually that I always pick up is lots of nuts, walnuts, and also lots of dried fruit, apricots, and figs. Lots of tannin, very spicy. So you actually have to have some American oak in there to kind of tame it, because rye is spicy, and then you have those truly spicy European oak barrels. I don't know how the other guys see it in the panel, but we had the feeling that you either go and age it for very, very long, just basically like cognac, you have to go 10, 12 years in European oak, or you have to add some other barrels to kind of make it really round in terms of aging rye in there, because rye just packs so much punch.
That actually ties into a question that we had come in as well, which is what are the effects of wine casks on rye whiskey? So I guess this is like, what are there particular types of casks that you feel really complement rye whiskey in a way that maybe they don't necessarily work as well with single malt or any other type of whiskey? Alex, I know you're working with a variety of different types of cask. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I mean, the PX or the STR sherry, they both give that lovely, rich, fruity note, which kind of accentuates, it actually balances the spice of the rye, but accentuates all those kind of stewed fruit notes that you want to balance out the spice generally. So it's a really lovely way to balance the liquid out, particularly when the ABV is higher. I love this Bastion. It's really, really lovely. I've just added a little bit of water and it's just opened up brilliantly.
Yeah, wonderful whiskey.
Definitely recommend a few drops of water in this one.
definitely add a bit of water. Christian, I wanted to ask you the same question as well, because I know your main focus at OurWhisky is really on the maturation side of things in the casks. What have you found with working with different styles?
Yeah, look, I worked also with some Shiraz from Australia and some Cabernets from the Coonawarra region, and they actually they enhance more of that spicy character. So that's another program that we have within the distillery. It's we have a wine finish program that we're working on, but also I think it's good to balance out the sweetness, and for that a little bit of American toasted oak can bring that into the equation to balance out that spice. But yeah, we're working with some Shiraz and Cabernet Sauvignons from Australia. They just phenomenal wines to be paired with the rye.
Do you think do you need to use a big? I mean, you're naming some very big, bold flavored wines there. Does it need to be a big, bold cask type that to mature rye for that character to really stand up against the flavor of the grain?
Well, for instance, right now it's only going for about 5 months, yeah. And then once we taste the cask every month, and then even at the third or fourth month, there's still room for that whiskey or that new make to stay in that cask. But the thing is, like, we have to taste it monthly because of the temperatures here. So as soon as it starts getting warmer, that's when the real extraction happens. And so that's where we have to put an eye on and then decide. But I think a maximum of like 6 months. Otherwise, the dominant character of the Syrah will go over the rye. But that only time will tell, you know.
That's a pretty general rule of thumb, I think, for using any kind of wine cask on any kind of whiskey. What you don't want is for that cask to completely overshadow the flavor of the spirit that you've created, the flavor of the grain, etc. Obviously, all of the whiskies that we've just tasted are around. Bastian, is yours around 3 and 4 years old as well?
It's a blend of 3 to 4 year old whiskies. Absolutely. So I've seen the question about the aging. I think we've all probably in the panel have tasted American rye whiskies that have been older, or bourbon whiskies, and I think the temperature in the US, where it's usually where most of the whiskey comes from, at least, is just not really comparable to our European or Northern European temperatures. So I'm not quite sure if rye is to be aged 10, 12 years. I'm sure there's it won't be bad. I've been to one session where someone, I think from Coverland Whiskey, was holding a master class. No, actually it was from a Canadian distiller who said, like, the sweet spot in their research was in between 4 and 8 years. That's something I've heard about the aging.
Yeah, absolutely. If anybody has any more questions, we've got maybe just about 10 minutes left before we have to wrap up the session. So now's a good time to get those questions in for everyone. I just want to go back through the chat really quickly, because I spotted we have our golden ticket winner among us tonight. So here we are. Congratulations, Rachel Vaughan-Jones, who has the golden ticket and is very happy about it as well, which is great. Rachel, good luck deciding which whiskey you're going to get. It's a tough choice, I know, but if anyone has recommendations for Rachel for which whiskey she should go for, what has been your favorite tonight? If you had the golden ticket, what would you be choosing? Put it in a comment. I'd love to see. We've had another question come in from Sean Buchan. Hi, Sean. And Sean has asked, since the rye seems to need less time in different casks, do you have to consider when you distill and fill? So what time of year, I suppose, that has to do with? Does anyone have an answer for that one? Maybe Hans?
Yeah, when we started, we used a lot of small casks, like 50 30 liter and 50 liter casks, and they mature so much faster. So 3-4 years is definitely a long time in a smaller cask, but it seems to be for our whiskey at least these 3 to 4 years in a 200 liter standard American standard barrel is really it suits us really well. And we have tried French oak, Limousin oak, and Missouri white oak. And we for our whiskey we just liked the flavor of American oak better. I think it's we came in with an ideal of these American whiskies we looked up to, and this ideal we kind of wanted to transfer into our own whiskies. Yeah, so we are sticking to American oak now. Yeah, but also an interesting thing I feel about our rye whiskies, we produce about 50% rye whiskey and 50% single malts, and it's from our experience now we've tried many different casks. We often give finishes to our rye whiskies, and it's like the rye whiskey is a really good medium for extracting flavor from the cask. It does it faster than our single malts do. So we can get for just a few months, for instance, in a rum cask. We've tried with many different rum casks, Cuban rum casks, Belize rum casks, yeah, and they just give off flavor in 2-3 months, and also vermouth casks and fortified wine casks of different type. It's a really good medium for extracting flavor from the cask it goes into, better than single malts, and at least it does it faster. Yeah.
So just to go back on this, you're maturing your rye whiskey in vermouth casks.
Yeah, we just released it about a month ago. A 4-year-old rye whiskey with a finish in for 1 year in a vermouth cask. I can show it. And
how does that change the flavor of the rye whiskey? How does that enhance it?
Called El Clásico. And it's like it's basically a very strong Manhattan kind of, because vermouth and rye whiskey go really well together. So it's a very nice whiskey with just a touch of the spices and the wormwood flavor and all these spices that go into a vermouth. It transfers really nicely into the rye whiskey and makes it sweeter and even more spicy. Yeah.
What I really love about all of the whiskies we've tried tonight is that each one of you are creating whiskey in, like with your own DNA, your own style, your own approach to it, and you're really creating a spirit that's a reflection of where you are in the world, of not just your country but your city, your local environment, working with local farmers, local growers, in some cases local producers of other kinds of spirits to mature your whiskey in as well, which I think is so lovely to see. And we've obviously got rye whiskey here, from England, Scotland, Denmark, and Germany, and there's obviously rye whiskey that's produced all over the world as well. There's Finland as well. There's the Netherlands too, all over the place. Here's a question for you, and I know you are going to be quite biased in this, and I want to come to each one of you. Where would you say is the up-and-coming place in the world that's going to rival the US and Canada in terms of rye whiskey and being famous for making world-class rye whiskey? Alex, I'm coming to you first because you're next to me on my screen.
That's a hard one, isn't it? Where's the best?
You're going to say England, but still.
Well, yeah, I risk offending half the panel. So I mean, I hope that there's more than one place, really, not just to be diplomatic, but in the true sense, there aren't enough people making rye to champion it as a grain variety. So I do really hope that we get more people championing it and talking about it. I think, when we do our whiskey tours at the distillery, there's a lot of education about the fact that you can make a whiskey and use rye, and you can make a single malt and not be in Scotland. So championing the category as a whole is definitely the way forward.
Hans, what do you think? I know obviously Scandinavian whiskey, rye is very popular in Scandinavia. Obviously, do you think it's Denmark that's going to lead this charge, or maybe other countries around you as well? Obviously, there's Kiro in Finland nearby.
Obviously, I like the thought of rye playing a role, as you mentioned, Bastian, also in Germany as a part of cultural history, with the food that we eat, and the idea of pairing food with whiskey and with drinks is appealing, I think. So maybe continental Europe or something like that is. I don't know how big the cultural part of cultural history rye is in England, and maybe in beer production or something, but these connections that make it that makes sense, kind of. You can take it back and say this is logical to produce rye whiskey in these countries. But of course, there's room for many distilleries and many expressions, and this new thing coming up in whiskey with terroir products make whiskey from all different parts of the world really interesting. It gives when you use local ingredients, the local water, the local barley, local rye, and it's just it makes it very interesting, like wines from all over the world. And it's a good thing, and it's an important thing that this is migrating into whiskey as well.
Agreed. And Christian, obviously being in Scotland, which is the single malt stronghold of the world, and our beaky's really focusing on that rye whiskey there. But you're not the only ones in Scotland making rye. Do you think that this is a new avenue for Scotch to move into?
Yeah, definitely. I think Bruichladdich are also joining in, and as well as Inchyderney. And definitely, I hope to see also Ireland in the mix. The more the merrier, so that way you can get to see the differences from different countries, and just to get more technical and everything about it, But I think Scotland, Bruichladdich has incredible marketing, and so does Inchyderney is a big distillery as well, producing rye. So
well, we've really come to the end of our time. I don't know about everyone at home, but I've loved tasting all these whiskies, and I've got so many more questions that we've just not got the time to pose to everybody. But this kind of brings me to the point where I just have to say thank you so much to our panelists, Alex, Hans, Bastian, Chico, and Christian. Thank you so much for joining us, and also to the lovely team at Woodford Reserve as well for supplying us with our very first whiskey there too. A huge thank you to everybody at home as well for joining us for this session. For those of you who've bought a tasting pack and supported our whiskey and our drive to raise money for the Drinks Trust, thank you so much for your support. Please leave a comment and let us know what you thought of this, and don't forget to share your experience on social media, especially if you've had a good experience as well, because we still have a couple more tasting sessions to go as part of the OurWhisky Festival. And next week is New Kids on the Block. I'm so excited for this one. So we're going to be tasting whiskey from new distilleries around the world, and I can promise that there are some whiskies in there that you will not have tried before. Christian wants Corey to call in, so Corey, call Christian, please. How romantic! How romantic is that? Don't forget, there are also golden tickets hidden in the last two remaining sessions. So there's one available in each session. So if you do want to be in with the chance of winning a bottle of whiskey, then you have to be in it. So buy a pack, and again, all the money goes to charity. So please do get involved. So next week is New Kids on the Block with new distilleries, and the week after is Wonka Vision. And I need to get these packs out of my house because there is so much amazing chocolate involved in these tasting packs. I just can't have them here anymore because I'm picking out all the extras, and I don't want to be digging into your boxes because it is amazing. Trust me. That leaves me to say thank you very much to everyone. Don't forget, if you did enjoy some of the whiskey today, then you can go and purchase a bottle from, I'm going to put it up here one more time, milroys.co.uk. So head over to there and use the discount code OurWhisky10. If you wanted to pick up a ticket to the remaining sessions, then head over to OurWhisky.com. And if you need to get in touch with me for anything, then you can either at me, Becky Paskin, or at OurWhisky. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much to our panelists. Again, I'm going to raise a glass and say cheers. Thank you so much. And here's to the future of rye whiskey. Cheers.
Slang.